time. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am very grateful for this opportunity to share with you information specific to the central, northern, and northeastern areas that are included in the current proposal for the 2024-25 enrollment plan. To provide some context, on September 19th, staff members presented the first draft of a new student enrollment proposal to the Board of Education. This first draft includes proposed school assignment changes for the 2024-25 school year. The proposal includes a recommendation for the base attendance area for the new Woods Creek Elementary School, which is scheduled to open in July of 2024, along with associated middle school changes to align the feeder pattern for this school. In addition, this year's student assignment proposal also includes base assignment changes, calendar application changes, and recommended stability rules in order to help relieve capped and overcrowded schools and fill our underutilized schools. These changes will provide an opportunity for most students to be able to attend a less crowded school and to have more efficient bus routes. In addition, the board will also discuss options to allow families affected by the proposal the opportunity to apply for a stability transfer and remain at their current school without district-provided transportation. The purpose of today's session is to share information related to the recommendations impacting the central, northern, and northeastern areas of the county. In addition, we will also take time to address any questions that you may have related to these recommendations. Your feedback will be used as we develop the second draft of the proposal, and that information will be shared with the board at a meeting on October 17th. So again, the second draft of the proposal will be shared with the board on October 17th. Si necesita ayuda en español, por favor envíe un correo electrónico a studentassignment@wcpss.net y alguien se comunicará con usted mañana. Before we begin, let me go over some logistics. Our session will last for no more than an hour and a half. We will begin with a presentation and conclude by responding to questions from today's session. Throughout the session, if you have questions regarding the proposal or the recommended stability rules or suggestions for staff to consider, please post them to our thought exchange and use the term #session2 to indicate you are in today's information session. By using that hashtag, that'll allow our moderators and hosts to find those specific comments that are being posted today in this session so that we know that we can answer those and address those later in our session today. We will continue to monitor the exchange throughout the presentation, and we'll make every effort to address as many of the questions as we possibly can toward the end of our session. In addition, you may also use the Q&A feature here in the Google Meet to pose questions. Please note that these questions will not be included in the final summary of public input for the board that will be shared when draft 2 is presented to the board. However, it will allow us to capture questions that you may have in today's session. To access the Q&A feature, please click on the set of 3 shapes, that triangle, square, and circle, that are located on the bottom right corner of your screen if you're on a computer. If you're on a mobile device, you'll want to look for the 3 dots, and when you click on the 3 dots, that will then give you the option to pick that same shape, the triangle, circle, and square. Once you've done that, you're then looking for this icon, the Q&A question mark, and then that'll take you to the section where you can post those questions. I will continue to display both of these sets of information throughout today's presentation. So if you're not quite ready to jump into the thought exchange or to post a question, I'll provide these instructions several times throughout the session so that you can access both of these options. Again, if you put your thought or comment into the thought exchange using either the QR code or the direct link and use the hashtag #session2, those thoughts and comments will be included in the full set of public comments that are shared with the board when we review everything during the draft 2 presentation. Either way, we'll address your questions in today's session. All right, I think we're ready. Okay, before we get too far into the presentation, we're going to share a 2-minute video that walks through the 4 pillars of our student assignment policy. This video provides the foundation for the process that is used whenever we develop the current or any enrollment plan for the school district.
It's no secret that our school district is growing, and it's growing fast. That means each year we need to open new schools to stay ahead of the curve. To state the obvious, we have to fill these schools with students. And this can only be done through student assignment. Each year, some students are assigned to one of our new schools or reassigned to an existing school. This ensures we have balanced school populations across the district. We know families love their schools and that student assignment decisions can be worrisome. That's why we want to be completely transparent in how we make them. Our school board has established 4 pillars that guide each and every student assignment decision. Here's what they mean and how they work together. Student achievement. This is what we're all about as a school district. We know high concentrations of poverty or too many low-performing students in a school can hinder progress. This pillar compels us to think about whether a student assignment plan can help address some of those issues. Stability. Essentially, we try to keep as many children at their current school through the exit grade as possible. When reassignments are necessary, we provide the opportunity for some students to grandfather and stay at their current school through the exit grade. Operational efficiency. This pillar is about making sure all of our schools are at their best use. Overcrowded schools are a problem. Classrooms packed with too many students are one thing, but then there are the endless carpool lines, bathroom facilities that can't comfortably accommodate everyone, and having to start lunch when most people are still working on breakfast. On the flip side, having under-enrolled schools is an inefficient use of public resources, particularly when there are crowded schools nearby. Proximity. Okay, this one can be a little tricky. In a perfect world, houses would be built in neat little rows on a predictable timeline and at a slow and steady rate. As it is, we live in an imperfect world, where lots and lots of homes pop up in one area while growth is slight or non-existent in others. For this reason, it is impossible to send every child to their most proximate school, unless we wanted some of our schools bursting at the seams while others are half empty. That said, this pillar states that we will send students to schools within a reasonable distance. Often, the difference between the most proximate school and the next most proximate is no more than a couple of miles. Please remember that we must consider all 4 of these pillars when making assignment decisions. There is no priority among the 4 that applies in every situation. It's a balancing act that ultimately helps us come up with the best possible plan for everyone. Thank you for working with us to ensure our school system continues to serve all students well.
I apologize for the technical difficulties. That video just likes to replay itself. So our hope is that that video gave you a brief insight into the intricacies of the policy that govern and guide our work as we develop each assignment plan for the annual enrollment plan process. Before we begin going through the very specific recommendations for the central, northern, and northeastern areas that are included in the current proposal, we would like to take a moment to review a few of the factors that impact the development of the plan. The goal is to help families to understand better what the entire planning process looks like so that you can better understand why the recommendations are made. Before we begin talking about the public engagement process in capped and overcrowded schools, I'll note that this process sort of is on an annual cycle, yet is also on a continuum. Each year around January, February, we share with the board long-range projections. It's a process that we go through every year to really look at what's happening in the county, throughout the county when it comes to residential development, different types of construction programs, anything that's happening in the economic development world, and what we know about birth rates in the district, any in-migration information that we can know and match that up with some census information. And we develop a really comprehensive long-range projection or forecast for the enrollment for the district for the coming school years, or which can last as far as I think 10, even 15 years out into the future. That forecast is annually updated, and the information on that forecast is posted to our website and linked through the enrollment proposal page. So if you're interested in reading all of the details of that, it's pretty fascinating. That sort of kicks off the process because it lets us have a feel for what's going to happen with enrollment growth over the next handful of years, and we can think about our current crowding, what those projections are telling us, and then start to make some decisions that are aligned with the pillars. Another element of our proposal is based on what we do with our public engagement process. So before I get too deep into it, I always want to remind everybody to go to this website. So this is the website where the information related to the current draft of the proposal is found, as well as links to any of the backup materials that show how we got to this point. I told you that we would show this link a couple of times. So if anyone joined us maybe during the video, this is the best way to get comments and questions to us. So the first way would be the thought exchange, which is this sort of large QR code. If you want to click that with your phone, that'll take you straight to the thought exchange. If you'll use the hashtag session2, which you're seeing displayed on the top right corner, if you'll use hashtag session2 in your comment, that'll help us find that comment and know that the person who's making the comment is in this session today, so that we know you want us to address that comment, question, or concern later on in today's session. Another way that you can provide a question to us is to use the Q&A feature right here in the Google Meet. If you're on a computer, you'll see this icon, the triangle, square, and circle on the bottom right of your screen. You can click on that and it'll take you to this QA feature. If you're on a mobile device, you'll want to click the three dots, then click on the shapes, and then you'll find the QA feature. Please note that if you put a question in the QA feature within the Google Meet, it will not be included in all of the comments that are shared with the board as public comment, but we certainly will address those questions in our session later today. I'll show that screen a couple of times. So if you're not quite ready to jump in and ask a question, I'll pop that back up for you a couple of times so that you can remember how to ask those questions. One of the things that we did this year for public engagement is in the spring, but in the April and May timeframe, we went around the areas where new schools were projected to be open and held some face-to-face information sessions with families and really engaged them in some dialogue around what's happening in their community and what they think we should know about growth. And so this just gives you an idea for where those sessions were held. I'll show you a map in a few slides that'll kind of give you a better view of where these sessions were held. But you can see that we had 190 total participants attend the various sessions. We also had a thought exchange that ran along with each of these, and we had 621 thoughts that were captured across these various information sessions. The core question that we asked families during these sessions first was, what should we know as district leadership and what should we be aware of and take into consideration when we're thinking about enrollment growth and school crowding? And what we heard is a general sort of consensus across all of the groups, and some key takeaways from this dialogue with families were what you see listed on this screen. This information was shared with the board in June, and so this is a bit of a review from the board's perspective. If you'd like to look at these in greater detail, the entire presentation that was given to the board on September 19th is posted to our website, so you can certainly take a little bit more time and read some of these slides at your, a little bit slower pace. But I do want to call attention to concepts like allowing for cohort continuity, being able to start and finish at the same school, and maybe even avoiding assignments to multiple schools for the same neighborhood, or keep neighborhoods together with their assignments. Some of those types of comments really impacted our planning process this year. In addition, we asked a second question of these same groups and said, what are some important things for leadership to be aware of and take into consideration when opening a new school in your area? So in the central portion of the plan, the central, northern, and northern areas, there are no projected new schools in this section for the presentation we're giving today, but there are some other areas where some new schools are projected to open in the next couple of years. And so we just wanted to get some more information from families specific to that. And so you can see here the list of themes that came out of those sessions. As an example, this would have been the results of the conversation around Woods Creek Elementary, which is scheduled to open in 24-25 and is included in this year's draft 1 of the plan. And you can see for these families, proximity, transportation, and continuity were very much top of mind when having the district think about what's important for their specific community. What we learned from these sessions is that we still have more questions, and we really wanted to conduct some focus groups to get some more insight from families about a couple of topics that came up or didn't come up in conversation. We really wanted to think about our stability rules, and you'll see how that has been impacted for the recommendations for this area, that this idea of keeping students in the school where they started, if at all possible, and maybe allowing them to stay with their classmates. That really impacted our recommendations for stability rules this year. And another element was just thinking about reviewing feeder patterns. As students are going from 5th to 6th grade or transitioning from 8th to 9th grade, having some ability to know some of your fellow students as you're going on to that next level. When we held the focus groups, we really honed in on 2 core concepts. One was cohort continuity, and the other was school calendar alignment. So for cohort continuity, we had a lot of families use this sort of phrasing saying, we want the students' cohorts to stay together, to be continuous or to stay together. And we really wanted to get a better understanding of what parents meant by that concept. Another topic that really didn't get a lot of conversation, but we as a district really need some input on it, was this idea of school calendar alignment. So in some parts of the district, you'll see that we have several multi-track year-round elementary schools that we try as much as we can to feed into a multi-track year-round middle school to provide families with K-8 calendar alignment. In other parts of the district, we don't have that option. And so sometimes it's a multi-track year-round elementary and then perhaps a traditional middle and traditional high school. So instead, the calendar alignment really is on that upper end of the grade scales, 6 through 12 instead of K through 8. And we just wanted to pose a question to the families to ask about that. So we partnered with our data research and accountability team, and we pulled together 3 focus groups that had between 5 and 7 participants in each of them. So we do have to give a word of caution. That's a small number of parent participants. We recognize that. So we do need to be careful that we don't infer that the results of these focus groups are, broadly should be used across the entire district. But they do give us some insight for some types of planning. So again, we're cautious, but we think some of this was really meaningful. When we dug into cohort continuity, what we really heard from parents was keeping students together is really this sort of common energy around this topic. And so one thing that we did see, however, is that then it starts to fracture a little bit. For some, keeping students together means if you're in the same neighborhood, you should be in the same school. In other cases, it might be that if I'm on the same school calendar, so if I'm in a particular track or if I'm on traditional or modified, that our students in our area should all stay on that same calendar. Maybe that's how we keep students together. And another one focused on a more simplistic approach of just, when we're transitioning from 5th to 6th, let's make sure those 5th graders stay together as they go into 6th grade so they have some friends and they know some fellow students as they're moving on to that next level. So what we really got out of that is that parents were really expressing that this continuity really helps those strong relationships that are forged between students to sort of convey some resilience for students and ultimately have positive impacts on their academic outcomes. And we mentioned a lot about growth in that video, and we'll talk about it a little bit more through today's presentation, but the year-round calendar is one tool that we have for addressing growth and enrollment growth in particular at our schools that are severely crowded or expected to be crowded as new enrollment and new growth comes in those areas. So we did ask families in this particular area. So again, I've got to be careful. This is a particular part of the county where new schools are opening and there's a lot of high rates of growth. We asked these families, would you prefer a reassignment or capping or year-round calendar? Which of these seems to be a more stable approach to addressing this growth? And by and large, the families that we asked said the year-round calendar would be preferred and would be less unstable perhaps than maybe a reassignment or capping. But again, I do need to caution, I think particularly in our central region, going to a year-round calendar to address crowding might not be as well received. So we do want to be careful that we use this information as it was given to us in a regional context. And then the last question we asked, I kind of queued up for you, is about calendar alignment, the K-8 versus the 6-12. And what we found was it's really inconclusive at this time. Depending on the perspective of the family and the age of their students, the answers really varied quite broadly. So there are some families that really like that K-8 multi-track kind of calendar continuity, and others that say, well, if we're year-round for elementary, but we're traditional for 6 through 12, that's preferred because we have some experience with students in high school. So we're going to continue to, ask families about this and really maybe take a regional approach to this, but it was helpful information for us to review in those focus groups. So then we take those focus groups, use that information, we develop our draft plan, and now we're in the second phase of public engagement, which is really asking you to review our recommendations and provide feedback, ask questions, provide suggestions, so that we can review all of those in preparation for developing draft 2. So as you can see, you're the second information session out of a series of 4. So if you find this session helpful and you have friends or family that couldn't join us today, you could certainly encourage them to join us on October 5th for that general session, or you could ask them to visit the website and watch the recording of today's session, whichever works best with their schedule. Again, this is how you can provide public questions for today. So any questions that you post in the thought exchange with the hashtag session 2, our host will cull through that and go through the moderator section and find those questions and make sure that those are addressed in our session live today toward the end of the session. Or if you want to use the QA feature in the Google Meet itself, you're welcome to do that as well. Again, just a caution, if you post a question using the Q&A feature, we won't be able to include that in the public comment that the board sees, but anything that goes into the thought exchange, every board member can see all of those thoughts and questions. Another thing that we look at as we're preparing our plan is, what do we know already about our capped and overcrowded schools? So in the central, northern, and northeastern area, you'll see that I've already pre-highlighted some of the schools that are impacted by capping. So Abbott's Creek Elementary, Beaver Dam Elementary, and Riverbend Elementary are mostly in the sort of northeastern section of this area. They are all presently capped. And just as a reminder, a CAP school means that the enrollment growth in that base attendance area has come on so rapidly that they've reached a point where there's a possibility that they can't fit any more new students into the school. And so as the next new student comes in, once they've hit that cap number, they would have to be assigned to an alternate or overflow school. The district will provide transportation, but they wouldn't be allowed to go to the school that their address puts them at because there's not enough room for the student to be served. So our goal is not to have those last for a long term, but you can see across the district, we have 20 different elementary schools that are in this position. So we're working really hard with our assignment recommendations to relieve pressure on these where we can. Another element that we look at is just general crowding. So not all of our crowded schools are capped. Some of them are managing their crowding, but it's getting more and more difficult. So what you see on this map, which was shared with the board several times since February, is the projected crowding for the current school year at the elementary level. So any of the attendance areas that you see in red are projected to be at or above 110% crowding, which is where it starts to get really uncomfortable on these campuses. And many of the ones that you see highlighted in red are on that cap list. If you see an area that's highlighted in orange, then that means that school was projected to be between 100 and 110% crowding. Not ideal for academic delivery and safety of students, or in terms of just having a lot of students on campus and long carpool lines and that sort of thing. So obviously we keep our students safe on campus, but it starts to get, a little full when you're between 100 and 110%. So our goal is to try to work on having these levels of crowding brought down. And then anything that's in yellow is in the 90 to 100% category, which generally speaking is really where we want our schools to be. That's an optimal utilization rate, but we have to monitor them if they're in high growth areas, because it means next year they could potentially already be bumping over that 100% mark. And then the white areas that you see on the map are those schools that are at or below 90% crowding. And so these might be schools where we're looking to provide more students to help them better utilize their facilities. At the middle school level and high school level, we also have some capped schools. The only one in the sort of northern or northeastern area for you all is the Heritage High School. That school is currently capped. And so we are monitoring the growth in that base attendance area to try to make sure that students can be served. Here's a map for the middle school, the crowding. I won't go through the colors. The colors mean the same thing here. So this would be the projected middle school crowding across the district. And then this is the projected high school crowding across the district. So that's just another one of the pieces of information we take into consideration. So just as a reminder, we start with that long range forecast that helps us really think about how much growth is coming to the district overall and by region. We look at information we've collected from parents about their perspectives and what their sense of community is and some suggestions that they have for us. We look at what we already know about our capped and overcrowded schools. And then we think about what we do know is coming to relieve perhaps some of those capped or overcrowded schools in form of new construction. So what you're seeing here is a list of all the schools that are projected to open as new schools over the next several years. So in 24-25, you can see that sort of second column there. There's one school that's listed in green, that's Woods Creek Elementary. So Woods Creek Elementary, and I'll show you a map in just a moment about where all these are located. Currently, a different elementary school, Bauckham Elementary School, their students are in Woods Creek Elementary while their campus is being renovated. Once their campus is renovated, those students will return to their original campus, and then Woods Creek will be ready to open as its own independent new elementary school. In 25-26, you can see we have several schools that are projected to open throughout the southern and western parts of the district. And then in 27, 28, you see we have a high school in the Morrisville area that's projected to open. And then in the out years, you start to see schools like Pool Road, which is a little bit south of your area. That's probably more of an Eastern area school, but I'll show you those. I do have an asterisk on all of these, letting us know that due to market volatility, any scope changes, any design and construction schedule changes, those can all impact the delivery dates for these projects. However, as of right now, this is the projected schedule that we have. So just to give you a quick view of where they all are. So the school that's circled in red, that's the location of Woods Creek Elementary. So it's in the sort of southwestern corner of the county along US 1, sort of in the Apex, Holly Springs, New Hill area. The schools that were circled in blue now are those that are scheduled to open in the 25-26 school year. So again, along that sort of 55-540 corridor, and then a little bit closer to the Harnett County line there with Rex Road and Bowling Road. And then you see in the out years, the two schools that I mentioned, Morrisville High School and a Pool Road elementary site, they're scheduled to open in later years in the construction plan. In addition to the new schools that are projected to open, there are also some major renovations that are slated to occur, and those might be impacting schools in your area. In the central area, by way of example, Fuller Elementary recently had a major renovation. Conn Elementary recently had a major renovation. So in the northern sort of area, West Millbrook has recently had a major renovation. So just things to think about, that there are also additional capital improvement dollars that are being put towards those renovation projects. So we think about those, we think about the renovation projects, we think about the new school projects, and then we start and we layer that on with the forecasted growth across the district and try to take into consideration as much as we can parent perspective and family feedback. So what we're going to now do is start talking about the first draft of the enrollment plan. Again, one more reminder, if you would like to ask a question for today's session, please use the Q&A feature or the thought exchange. If you use the thought exchange, we encourage you to use hashtag session2 so that we can identify that that question was put in during today's session. And so now we're ready to talk about the recommendations for base assignment changes. Before we show all of the ones for the Central, Northern, and Northwest, I just want to give you a quick overview of all the schools that are impacted in the first draft. So what this slide is sharing for you is the number of schools and the names of the schools that are projected to have students assigned out. Those would be the sending schools. And then the receiving schools is the list of elementary schools that are projected to have or proposed to have students assigned into their campuses. You'll see on the map on the right then a basic visual distribution of where these are impacting us throughout the county. As a reminder, the sort of yellow line in the center, that would be the belt line and 440 and 40. And then that second layer of the yellow line is the existing 540. And of course, 540 is continuing down in the southern regions. You can kind of see where the future 540, where it's under construction, is displayed on the map. So if that kind of orients you a little bit. At the middle school level, there are less schools impacted. For this year's enrollment proposal, all of the middle school recommendations are specifically complementary to the elementary school change recommendations. So the reason they're included here is because it's a feeder pattern alignment. Same thing for the high school. The only high school recommendations that are included in this year's plan are directly related to keeping a feeder pattern or a cohort together as a result of those elementary school recommendations. All right. Another thing that we've learned is a lot of times the questions that you have are about me and my family and my individual student. And that's absolutely the type of question we know we need to support you with. And so we want to tell you first what the stability rules are. If your address is impacted by a proposed assignment change and it does get approved, right now for all of the recommendations that I'm going to talk about in today's session, so the central area, the northern area, and the northeastern area recommendations, all of these are recommendations to go from an existing school to an existing school that don't reflect a significant or major change in the assignment area for the school. So all of the recommendations we'll go over today would be eligible for these most generous versions of the stability rules, where any existing student would be allowed to stay without district transportation at their current school if they would like to, through the terminal grade. So if you're a third grader, you could stay for fourth and fifth grade. If you're a sixth grader, you could stay for seventh and eighth. If you're a ninth or a 10th grader, you could stay all the way through your 12th grade year. The only change, of course, is that transportation piece. As the district changes the assignment areas for school, then the buses would be routed for those base schools newly identified for the address rather than the older assignment area. So we realize that that creates some challenges for families, but we are trying to provide as much opportunity for families to stay where they are if they can provide the transportation. Separately, if you have a rising kindergarten student that wants to join that other elementary student, we can use the stability rules to get them at that same school with them. Same goes for a rising sixth or a rising ninth grader. And so we'll see where these might impact the central area in particular. Okay, I think we're ready. So let's go ahead and start talking about the specific recommendations that are included for the central area, the northern area, and the northeastern area as a base assignment change. Let me talk you through how the maps are set up, and then we can go a little faster as we go through the rest of the recommendations. The picture that you see on the left of the screen represents the colors for the base attendance area for the existing base attendance area for the schools. So what you're seeing in the left is that the purple area represents the current attendance area for Combs Elementary. The light blue area that's more on the top half of that map represents Olds Elementary's current base attendance area. And the slightly darker blue that has the hash marks in it represents a current attendance area for students that go to Carpenter Elementary, as well as Alston Ridge Middle, but we'll see that in just a moment. And so there, we've highlighted them in a circle to draw your attention to this is the area we're recommending to change the assignment. If you don't know how the map is set up, the yellow line on the that's kind of curving on the left represents I-440 or the Beltline. The yellow line towards the bottom represents I-40, that continuing part that comes, up from, I guess, Johnston County and, goes out toward Durham. And then the darker blackish, grayish colored line that's cutting between that blue attendance area or between the blue and purple attendance area, that represents Chapel Hill Road or Hillsborough Street. So if that kind of helps you to orient. So the section that we're looking at that's highlighted in the circle is just below Western Avenue, and the right edge of that section is Gorman Street. So if that kind of helps you to figure out where this is located. So the recommendation that's included for this then is to look at the map on the right. So the map on the right then will show you, if approved as recommended today, those would be the new attendance areas for the school. So you can see that the students would be changed in assignment from Carpenter Elementary, which is out in the Morrisville area, to more proximate schools of Combs Elementary and Olds Elementary based on address. You can see it's being separated into two pieces. This slide then will show you some overall impacts on the utilization or the capacity impacts for the schools. So the top table that's labeled 2023 base school shows you if we do nothing, this would be the projected crowding for these schools for 24-25, the year that the plan would take effect, and also for 26-27, a couple of years down the road, just so we can see that sort of growth piece that's factoring in. So as you can see, if we don't make any changes to the Carpenter Elementary base attendance area, they're going to continue to grow based on these current projections. And if we, Combs and Olds is a little bit of an interesting campus. If you'll notice, its capacity with trailers is listed at 220. That means it's one of our smallest, if not the smallest school that we have at the elementary level in our district. And so it's okay if it runs a little bit overcrowded, because the percent, 2 students could be a whole percentage point for them, where for other campuses that might reflect 20 or 30 students. So we've talked with the principal, and as you can see, it's starting to have some changing over of the neighborhood where it's starting to decrease in its overall enrollment over time. So we feel that this new recommendation will help to absorb and boost the school up. I do want to draw your attention to the title capacity with trailers, because I've had questions about this from some other families. What this simply means is the maximum capacity for this campus. Some campuses don't have trailers, and so this number is simply their maximum capacity. But for those campuses that do have trailers, this would be their core facilities plus their trailers equaling a total capacity. So it's the maximum capacity for the school based on the 24-25 projections. This now you're going to see one of what I call complementary assignment recommendations. So based on the Combs and the Carpenter recommendation, those students are also going to, Carpenter to Combs and Olds. The students are currently going to Alston Ridge Middle, which is also out in the Morrisville area. So if we're going to change the assignment to Combs and Olds, we would also like to have a complementary middle school assignment to let them join their fellow colleagues and students as they're promoting on to middle school at both Centennial and Martin. So the blue represents the Centennial Middle School base attendance area, and the purple represents the Martin Middle School base attendance area. So again, this recommendation is specifically being made to complement and create a nice K or a feeder pattern for the students. This area is already assigned to Athens Drive High School, along with the majority of the attendance area that you see highlighted here. So there's not a subsequent recommendation for a high school change. Here you can see again the same numbers. So the top table represents if we do nothing. As you can see, Alston Ridge Middle School continues to be crowded, and it actually does have some growth in its base attendance area that's going to come in those out years that are not displayed on this chart. And so you can see that positive impact on reducing crowding at Alston Ridge, it does take advantage of some of the available capacity at Centennial, puts a little bit of extra students at Martin, but we feel confident with their magnet program that we can balance out the new students. Now, this set of recommendations is going to involve all three levels, so elementary, middle, and high school. This set of recommendations starts by looking at what you see in the left map that's sort of circled with a rectangular shape, and then there's a smaller shape that's up. I think you all can see my mouse, right? So there's a smaller shape that's here, and then there's this larger shape that's here. Most of this is currently assigned to Leesville Elementary, Leesville Middle, and Leesville High School, or Leesville Road Elementary, Leesville Road Middle, and Leesville Road High School. There's also a small portion just underneath it that's currently assigned to Southeast Raleigh Elementary and Centennial Middle and Southeast Raleigh High School. So we're going to talk about all of the recommendations. You can see here on the left what the current assignment areas are, and you can see here on the right what the proposed recommended new assignment areas would be. I'm going to go ahead and advance a slide because we have a zoomed in version because we know that's a lot to look at on this particular map. So we've zoomed it in a little bit. This is the same map, just focused in a little bit more. And so now you can see the portion on the north. It's along North Raleigh Boulevard, just past the food line or just north of the food line. So it's an area right here along North Raleigh Boulevard. This area currently goes to Leesville Road Elementary, Leesville Road Middle, Leesville Road High School. The recommendation is for this area to join Joyner Elementary. And you can't see it on this map, but it's on the other map that was zoomed out a little bit. So that will be a much more proximate school assignment for these students. Looking at the rectangular shape, this portion here that has a northern border of Glasscock Street and a southern border of Oakwood Avenue along the North Raleigh Boulevard as that eastern edge. And then this is North State Street, which kind of jumps into Tarboro at some point, but North State Street is that western edge of this area. There's a portion of the Underwood base attendance area, Underwood Elementary base attendance area that's already right here next to it. So we're recommending that it join that section and become part of the Underwood Elementary base attendance area. The portion that's in the middle of this rectangular shape that's bounded on the north by Oakwood Avenue and on the south by Newbern Avenue. And again, North Raleigh Boulevard over here on the east. And this time it is Tarboro on the west. This section here, we're recommending that it join an existing portion of the Powell Elementary base. Again, getting the students to a significantly closer to home school. I do need to be cautious. The students will not be going to the closest school to their home, as you saw in the video. That's not always possible, but they certainly are much closer than and more proximate than the schools they're currently attending. The lower portion of the rectangle, along with this little piece out of the Southeast Raleigh Elementary base attendance area, are being recommended to join Hunter Elementary. So that's below Newbern, again, Raleigh Boulevard as an eastern border. And then coming down here, this red line represents roughly East Davie Street. So the reason that this portion is being recommended to come from Southeast Raleigh Elementary to Hunter is when driving these neighborhoods in preparation for the first draft of the proposal, we realized that there's a singular neighborhood here that exits into East Davie Street, and everything else for Southeast Raleigh Elementary is much lower. So it's a very inefficient transportation network for this area. So to support a more efficient transportation network and have a negligible impact on Southeast Raleigh Elementary, we're recommending that this join this area from Leesville and become part of the Hunter base. On this slide, obviously, a number of schools are involved, and so you can see a significant list of schools. The top, again, represents what happens if we make no assignment changes, and the bottom shows if we implement these assignment changes, what the proposed impact would be. And what you can see is a little bit better use of facility utilization across the board. We still have some schools that'll be a little bit overcrowded, but we think we can manage that because several of these are magnet schools, and we can balance this out through magnet applications. You'll see that Leesville Road Elementary has a special note saying that it's also impacted by another assignment change. There is another recommendation specific to the Northwestern region that would assign students from Pleasant Grove Elementary into Leesville Elementary. So that softens the impact on Leesville Elementary because this does represent a significant number of students that do attend Leesville Elementary today. Now we're moving again into those complementary recommendations. So if all of those students are now no longer going to Leesville Road Elementary, if the plan is approved as proposed, and going to these schools that are a little bit closer to home, then we certainly would want to recommend thinking about that parent feedback about keeping students together in cohorts and being able to age forward together into middle and high school. We would want to have these students go to similar middle and high schools to the students in those elementary schools. And so what you're seeing here is a recommendation to either align them from Leesville Road Middle School to either Ligon Middle School or Martin Middle School based on that feeder pattern alignment at the elementary level. In addition, that portion from Southeast Raleigh Elementary currently is assigned to Centennial Middle, so we would recommend it join Ligon along with that Hunter group and the Powell group. And then the Underwood group and the Joyner group would be aligned with Martin Middle. Here again, you see that potential impact on the schools in terms of crowding impacts. You'll note the Centennial Middle School and Martin Middle School are also impacted by other assignment changes. Those were the ones that we talked about early on related to coming from Carpenter and Alston Ridge Middle to Olds and Combs, as well as Martin and Centennial. And then the third series in this series, because as I mentioned at the outset, this is Leesville Road Elementary, Leesville Road Middle, Leesville Road High School. We'd want to have that complementary feeder pattern alignment for these students to be able to go to a school that feeds from this feeder pattern. And so the recommendations here are to come from Leesville Road High School and go to either Enloe High School or Broughton High School, both of which are magnet schools. And then the section that is currently at Southeast Raleigh Elementary is also currently at Southeast Raleigh High School. So we would recommend aligning that to Enloe along with the other Ligon students in this area. And again, here you can see the potential impacts on crowding. Okay. One other set of recommendations that starts to take us a little bit more northeast is there are some current students that are reside inside the Beltline. So the yellow line that you see kind of curving here represents the 440 Beltline. This darker line that starts to fade a little bit as it comes into the city that represents New Bern Avenue. And so there's an attendance area right here that's just near the hospital, Wake Med, that is currently assigned to Durant Road Elementary. It's a pretty distant commute for these students. And while there's also a lot of students that live in this general area. So for a portion of the attendance area that's off of Kelly Austin Drive, we're recommending that that section off of Kelly Austin Drive join the existing partnership elementary base attendance area. And so you can see that the school is physically located here. So it is significantly closer for these students than Durant Road Elementary. In addition, there's some capacity available that can manage this influx of students. So you can see that the resulting map would show that a portion would still be going to Durant Road Elementary, but this section here would be joining Partnership Elementary. You can see here the potential impact. We have a special note for Durant Road Elementary, similar to Leesville, and that there is another recommendation that we're going to talk about that can take advantage of some of the seats that are being opened up by this recommendation to help Durant Road not have such a drastic change in membership. This is one of those complementary recommendations. So since that area would no longer be going to Durant Road Elementary if approved as proposed, then we would also recommend aligning them at the middle school level to Moore Square, which is the school that partnership feeds into. So we would join it with the existing Moore Square based attendance area. And again, that would be a much more proximate school for these students. Durant Road Elementary currently operates on a track 4 calendar, and as does the middle school. Partnership and Moore Square can currently operate on the modified calendar. So it's very similar to that track 4 calendar, but just a little bit different. And so here you can see the impact on the schools. So as I mentioned just 2 slides ago, since we're going to potentially be taking students out of Durant Road Elementary, we wanted to make sure that there wasn't such a drastic change in total enrollment for the campus and to better utilize its facility. So we're recommending that this portion of the existing Sanford Creek elementary base attendance area. So here's Sanford Creek's campus. The dotted line that you see here represents the Franklin County line. The yellow line that you see here represents 540. And then this is the 1 and 401 split up here in the northern part of the county, 401 and 1. So this area is currently assigned to Sanford Creek Elementary, and if we are able to get approval for the recommendation I just showed you, then there would be sufficient space for the students in this area to go to a much closer school and be able to go to Durant Road Elementary. And you'll also see that we'll provide some needed relief to Sanford Creek, which is currently operating well over 100% and projected to continue to grow. This would provide significant relief for that campus, as well as provide some growth opportunities for the Durant Road Elementary base. That area is already at a middle school and a high school in their area, so there's not a complementary middle or high school recommendation needed for this recommendation. Okay, so those are our base assignment recommendations. At this point, you may have questions. So just in case you haven't accessed our thought exchange or the Q&A feature on the Meet, I encourage you to do so at this time. Again, if you're using the thought exchange, if you'll please use hashtag session2 so that we can make sure we know that the question's coming from the session. And then before we get into the question and answer, we've got a couple of things left to share you. So there's some calendar application change recommendations. So let me go back to this slide for just a moment. With the calendar application recommendation changes, it gets misunderstood a little bit. We're not saying that families can no longer ask for the school with a different calendar. We're simply saying that we're having to reduce how much district transportation is provided for those options. So any students impacted by these recommendations would be eligible for those really generous stability rules. And if they can provide their own transportation, they can keep going to those schools. And if they'd like to put in new applications based on calendar, as long as we can accommodate it, we would approve it. And then if we can approve it, then you would just be responsible for transportation if you're impacted by these changes. There will still be some transportation available for some calendar application choices just for a little bit longer, but ultimately we are working to improve our transportation routing by reducing the pressure that these types of application choices put on the system. So how to read the chart. The column on the left says if my address is currently in, and I'll use one of the highlighted ones, Durant Road. If my address is currently in the Durant Road elementary base attendance area, and when I type in my address in our address lookup tool, I see Fox Elementary or Wakefield Elementary as a traditional calendar option that comes with district transportation. The recommendation would be that the district would no longer provide transportation to those options. However, families still could put in transfer requests and ask for a seat at those schools. We just would no longer provide transportation. If families really need district provided transportation, they would certainly be welcomed at Durant Road Elementary, or if they wanted to put in a magnet application or something like that and were able to be selected through the lottery, we would help them that way. So the left column is where's my base? The middle column is what I see today on the address lookup. The right column is that recommendation to either continue or not continue transportation for these options. In some cases, like the Heritage example, you'll see an asterisk, a single asterisk on the column on the right. That means if Wake Forest is already something you see as an application choice, you will continue to see that and it will still be provided with transportation. If, however, you don't already see Wake Forest as a choice, it won't be added. So that's what that one asterisk means. And then in some of the other areas in the center column, you'll see that there's two asterisks. That simply means we would allow the students who currently have transportation to keep that transportation until they age out, but no new students could be added to the list. This full list, as I mentioned, is on our website, so I'll let you kind of look at that maybe at a different time, but I do want to pause just for a moment and note that Jones Dairy-based students have some impacts, River Bend-based students, and Wilburn-based students have some projected impacts. Again, this entire presentation is posted to our website so that you can look at it a little bit slower, and you can also use our Draft One address lookup tool to check your own personal address to see if it's impacted as well. At the middle school level, we also have some recommendations. So again, the school on the left would be the current base middle school. The schools in the middle would be the schools that they currently see as calendar options that come with district transportation. The column on the right is what we're proposing would either remain or no longer be available from a transportation perspective. So again, we're not saying you can't ask for that other choice. We're simply saying we can no longer provide transportation to those options. All right. The recommended stability rules. We talked about these earlier, so I'll go through them relatively quickly. These are the set of rules for that new Woods Creek Elementary School, which does not impact the recommendations in this area. These are the recommendations for Pleasant Grove Elementary. So if you know anybody who's being recommended from Pleasant Grove into, let's say, Briar Creek or Leesville or York, these would apply to them. But for all of the recommendations we've discussed so far, the base assignment changes and the calendar application changes that impact the central, northern, and northeastern area, this would be the set of rules for you, which is the most generous rules. And again, this is in response to the feedback we received about trying as hard as we can as a district to allow families to keep their students at the school they start at. We do recognize that not having transportation can provide a burden for some families, yet at this point, we just don't think we have the resources to be able to continue to provide transportation for these types of transfers. Right. Yeah, no, my thought exchange, I love it. And that Q&A feature. So let's go into our timeline and next steps. So where are we in the timeline for the board? So we've given our first presentation on September 19th. We're doing our information sessions. We're gathering feedback from the thought exchange. We're really reflecting on all of the comments and thoughts and questions. We even see questions and thoughts that say, you're not going to read this anyway. So we really do read every single comment, thought, question, concern that's posted. And we use some really powerful technology to help us sort and organize those and to help us analyze them and how they're impacting the recommendations. And then we'll make any recommended revisions before we present draft 2. So on October 17th, we'll take our second draft with some information about all of our public engagement as well as any other recommended adjustments to the board. The board then will hold their own public hearing on November 8th. That's a more traditional and formal public hearing that's held at our board offices, and you can sign up and register for that. More information for that will be shared closer to the date. And then we are at this time on schedule to take to the board a final draft on November 21st for their review and eventual approval. This is what we talked about before. We're right here on this session. So if you know anybody that wants to come to a session and thinks that this would be helpful, they can come on October 5th because we'll have a general overview. Also, this session is being recorded, as we mentioned at the outset, and we'll post it to the website so families can watch this if that's more convenient. All right. Whoops. So now I jumped ahead. So now we're ready to start looking at the questions that have been posted. Our host has been looking at the thought exchange and in the moderation section of the thought exchange to see if there's any comments that have been posted with the hashtag session2. Our other moderators have been monitoring the Q&A feature and trying to identify those questions. And so I think Corrali's going to say a little something, and then I'm going to drink some water, and then we'll answer as many questions as we possibly can with the time that remains.
Thank you all, and continue to submit questions. Susan, when you're ready, I can ask you. Okay. Let's see. Can we discuss the feeder pattern for Barton Pond? This person said we moved from lead mine and they were a feeder pattern for Carroll. The rest of the area goes to Leesville or West Millbrook. Our high school is Sanderson, and there is already West Millbrook to Sanderson feeder. Can you address this?
Actually, I know I have received some of these comments and I've seen some of these in the thought exchange as well. So we have been doing some research. We know that there's at least one neighborhood that is interested in a potential reassignment from Carroll to something else that feels a little bit more like a Barton Pond feeder pattern. So staff is evaluating this request and we're looking at it. We're not sure if it can be included in this year's 24-25 proposal, but we certainly feel like a review of that area will be included in recommendations in a future enrollment plan. However, we are aware of the concern here. We do understand what the situation is, and we're trying to look at what's going on with Pine Hollow and Leesville, and now that there's Barton Pond's fully open and we're finally getting everyone settling in. I'm not sure if you're familiar, there are some elementary recommendations that are in the Northwest as well that may potentially over time impact some middle school enrollments. So we just want to be cautious that we don't make any decisions too quickly, but it's definitely on our radar. It's definitely being reviewed. I'm not sure it'll make it to draft 2, so I don't want to overpromise, but it is definitely something that staff is reviewing.
Does anyone else want to submit questions?
Corrali, I did notice that some of the session 1 comments got stuck in the moderation section. I'm not sure if any of the session 2 comments maybe got stuck there.
I just checked. Let me refresh.
Okay. I do know we had some questions in the thought exchange related to the Leesville High School recommendations, so I'm not sure if anybody was interested in hearing about that. We've got some high school students that may be participating in one of the CTE programs at the high school, and they're wondering if they can stay at Leesville with the recommendation to maybe come to Enlow or Broughton. And the answer is yes. Those students would be eligible under the stability rules to be able to stay at Leesville. They would need to provide their own transportation, but we certainly could approve that stability transfer and those students could stay at that school and in that program. The other alternative would be as we get closer to the time to have to make a decision, if there's a program that they're enrolled in at Leesville that also is available at the potential new base high school, maybe Enlow or Broughton, we could make sure that the counselors are talking with the students so they can make the most well-informed choice possible. Would it be better for them to go ahead and come to the new base school that comes with district transportation, or would it be would preferred for them to stay at the high school that they're at and finish out? I certainly know there's a lot of emotional ties to high school, and once students start at a high school, changing high schools can be, it's something that just students don't really like to do. So that's why we have implemented those stability rules so students can stay if they'd like to.
None yet on our thought exchange.
Okay.
Just let us know if you have any last questions.
I do want to take a moment and just a special thank you to Karali Turnow from our communications department for being our host for today's session, to Eric Chansey, Sandra Chapman, Ashley Wilson from our student assignment office for being our moderators for today's session. Their help is invaluable in making sure that we provide the most customer service we possibly can in this process. Again, if there's anybody that you think would be well informed by attending one of our sessions, we still have 2 more. The next one is going to focus more on the Woods Creek Elementary recommendations and other recommendations in the southern and southwest area. That'll be Wednesday of next week. And then we'll have the session that's going to focus on the recommendations related to Bryan Road in the southeastern part of the county, as well as time for a general overview for any other area that people might have questions about. So if you feel someone would like to be a part of a live session and be able to ask their question live and be able to have it answered live, that would be great. Otherwise, continue to encourage families, friends, anybody to go to our website and participate in the thought exchange so that we can make sure our board gets a full breadth and depth of information from our residents and our families. Okay. And so with that, I say thank you. We do recognize that sometimes there's a very personal question you'd like to ask about your individual student that maybe isn't appropriate to ask in this type of forum. So please feel free to send that to me directly at my email address. Or si necesita ayuda en español, envíe un correo electrónico a studentassignment@wcpss.net. Thank you for attending our session, and hope everyone has a lovely evening.
Thank you so much for attending. Like we said earlier, it's recorded. As soon as we get the recording, I will post this on our website, 2024 enrollment plan. And then you'll be able to look back and also use our thought exchange to provide feedback and questions. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.